deal. We've got a serial entrepreneur who's had his hand in PayPal, Glow, Slide, Yelp, and now Affirm and HFB. He's been developing for mobile years before any of us thought it was important. We're going to see what he can teach us today. Please welcome Max Levchin and Alex Wilhelm from TechCrunch.
Good morning.
All righty.
Thank you. How's it going, Max?
Great.
Yeah?
Right out here.
This one's me. So it's been a year since you were here last time, and you're wearing the exact same shirt as last time. I'm kind of impressed by that. That's a long bit of dedication to the cause.
This one is going to take about 100 years to build fully, so I'm going to...
Fair enough. Now, the CEO of Uber was just on, and Mark Cuban, who I hear is on a television program, is on next. I did some quick math this morning, and I think that makes you the poorest person that we're interviewing in this first block here. How does that make you feel?
That's entirely inaccurate if you price my Affirm shares correctly.
And how would you price those shares if you got to kind of pick yourself?
Well, the sky's the limit. We're changing roughly 20% of US GDP here.
That's what you want to do. Before we get to Affirm, though, there's been a lot of talk recently in the market about eBay potentially divesting PayPal, maybe in an IPO again. And I wanted to know, kind of, because you know the company better than anyone else, should eBay spin PayPal out?
At some point, PayPal, and by at some point I mean in like the next 18 months for sure, or earlier, PayPal volume will outstrip eBay's. So for all intents and purposes, eBay will be a division of PayPal. So either PayPal spins eBay in, becomes a trading stock, PayPal gets spun out, some other deal happens. eBay remains a key market for PayPal, but ultimately it's the faster growing of the two, so whatever happens, PayPal must receive its full managerial attention.
If they did spin it out, though, would you be willing to buy shares in the newly public PayPal?
It depends entirely on who the management team becomes.
And who would you want to run the company if you got to pick? Aside, you can't say you, that's cheating.
I'm unavailable. I'm running my own financial services company. There's a whole bunch of people. Probably the best person, the last person to run PayPal after Pier departed after the acquisition was David Sachs, who has recently become available since.
He is in fact free, yeah.
He ran Yammer for Microsoft for a while, but he's definitely the one who knows PayPal circa entrepreneurial age the best.
So in the second quarter, PayPal had revenue of $1.9 billion, and Twitter had revenue of $312 million. So it's about a 6x differential there. Do you think PayPal by itself is worth more than Twitter right now, as a standalone entity?
That's asking someone who hasn't tracked PayPal financials in a very long time. I imagine it's at least a comparable level of value.
So say $35 billion.
I know better than to prognosticate about public markets.
Fair enough. So if you had sold PayPal under, let's say, 2014 market conditions, as opposed to 2002 market conditions, do you think you would have had a more successful IPO? Do you think you could have sold it for more money? How would that have looked differently through the lens of the current market?
Again, it's a kind of experiment you can only run once. PayPal today is a force to be reckoned with. I mean, it's an incredible juggernaut. It has one of the strongest network effects possible. It's as good a brand as Visa or MasterCard, perhaps better. Super hard to compare. I mean, it's an incredible company. I'm very, very proud of what we accomplished there.
It's just when you look backwards to the $1.5 billion price you sold it to eBay for, in light of current valuations we're seeing now and exits we're seeing now, even among companies I think are a lot weaker than PayPal was, the $1.5 billion feels small. It feels relatively modest.
Sure, but a decade has gone by. If anything, public markets and large-scale investors realized how permanent an impact on fundamental industries internet companies are. I think when we took PayPal public, it was still sort of in question whether these internet whippersnappers are going to be around forever. You know, JP Morgan has been around for a couple of hundred years. What will happen to PayPal? At this point, it's pretty safe to say PayPal is going to be around for a while. So I think things have changed.
Do you regret the price you sold PayPal for?
I tried very hard to minimize regret.
Fair enough. You only had 2.6% when it went public. It's a small number.
took a lot of money to build it out.
Fair enough. There's been a lot of talk about the bubble recently. People say we're in a bubble, we're not. But I think generally speaking, there's been a rise in asset prices over the last 12 to 18 months that has been somewhat scary. Do you see a correction in the public markets, say, the next 12 months?
Hard to tell about the public markets because they're so beholden to global forces that are well outside the valley. So any sort of a attempt to predict our own little tempest in a teacup is silly. At a macro level, we live in an extremely uncertain time. There is, at any given time, 2 or 3 major macroeconomic impacting conflicts that have nothing to do with Silicon Valley, to boot Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, Syria, ISIS. There's a long list of things being very scary.
On the private side, in Silicon Valley, will we see a correction in the price of companies in the next 12 months?
Selectively, yes. I think there's a bunch of companies that are solving profoundly important big deal problems where the market is pricing them, or the venture capital market is pricing them at the very least optimistically but correctly around the kind of impact that might have. There's a bunch of other companies that are not solving big problems that are riding the coattails of those valuations. I think those will get slapped down.
And those companies are?
You know who you are.
Do they really though? I don't think they actually do.
Well, then they're in for a surprise.
All right, well then be positive then. What are some of the companies right now that you think that are optimistically priced but are in fact solving problems of that size? So who are the superstars that you like?
So Travis just came off the stage. I think
That was too easy.
Well, it's the, on the one hand, eye-popping valuation. On the other hand, have an opportunity to disrupt, market size FedEx times Hertz.
Would you invest your own personal money at that valuation, at that 18.2?
I don't have to. I invested very early.
Would you do it again? I guess then, fine.
Well, here they have very restrictive policy on buying shares right now or selling shares, but I probably would invest.
Okay, but on the negative side, those companies that are not as transformative, they're not as impactful, do you see them getting a whack in the next 12 months as they try to raise more money?
I think they're going to find themselves having a hard time raising money as the actual value proposition at the revenue level or the market size level becomes more transparent. So Series C, Series A, relatively easy. Series B.
Are you dramatically subtweeting Square right now? I can't quite tell.
I was not thinking of Square.
Really? So do you think Square's valuation is relatively in line with where it should be?
I'm not nearly as familiar with their business since I'm not an investor as I perhaps should be. I think if they crack the small business lending piece that they've recently been digging into, they're probably undervalued.
Okay, it's optimistic I feel, but okay. And,
I love financial services.
I know.
I'm a little bit of a sucker.
It's your jam. Apple tomorrow is relatively expected to introduce some sort of payment software for its new phone and iWatch. Do you think they have the acumen in the payment space to handle that? Do you think people will use it?
They're so secretive, I have no idea who's even running the payments thing. For a long time, there was a rumor in the Valley that they're interviewing someone to run their payments initiative, and that seemed like an interesting step. They are by far the best position of all the big companies to really make a huge dent in payments. They have, I think, the world's largest collection of credit cards on file. Incidentally, as far as I can tell, that database has also never been cracked. So they're a giant target, but they could do some really serious rearrangement of deck chairs in that market.
If they do bring out this product tomorrow, do you think you'd want to find some way to integrate Affirm into it?
I'd love to. I think from what the reports had said so far, Apple is going to release something like a container for your payment methods. Affirm is a source of credit and a payment method in certain situations, so we would fit right in.
So, but Apple hasn't come to talk to you about integration thus far?
If they did, I couldn't tell you, and if they didn't, I couldn't tell you either.
Well, that's an incredibly boring answer, but okay.
Apple is very secretive.
They are very secretive, that's true. Has Apple tried to buy you?
Would Apple try to buy me?
Has Apple tried to buy Affirm?
Apple has not tried to buy me.
Good, there we go, solid answer. David Whiten, who put money into Slide, said that you would view that company as, quote, abject failure if it failed to sell for at least $1.5 billion. It didn't. Do you have the same standard for Affirm? Is that the same bar for success for the company?
Well, one, I'm not speaking for David Whiten then or now. Having said that, I've figured out right around the time of the Slide journey that I really want to measure my successes and failures by the number of people that use my products over a long period of time. At some point, Slide had hundreds of millions of users, and I felt very good about it, and that's when I made some sort of pronouncements about size of the value of the company. Ultimately, it didn't survive. There's not a single Slide product that's live today, and that to me is a failure. I want Affirm to be used by hundreds of millions of people long after I'm done or gone, and that would be a success. I don't really care what it sells for. To be honest, I don't really care to sell it.
So you don't really care the price you'll get for it in the end?
I don't want to put a dollar figure on it. I want to put number of, hopefully, hundreds of millions of users on the product.
Do you want to take it public or do you want to sell it privately?
I would like to do whatever is best for my employees and investors when the time comes. At the moment, I am unencumbered by either of those concerns. Okay,
now we've been talking about Affirm a little bit, but I don't think people really know what it is. I mean, people know you, but not the product. So give us a quick rundown about how it works and what it does.
So Affirm is an attempt to completely reinvent consumer banking and ultimately, hopefully, small business banking as well. We started with credit because one of the observations that I made, even right around PayPal times, was that internet was peeling off complexity and lack of information from just about every industry. And finance 10 years ago was really hard to figure out and really not transparent. And it still is today. When you get your credit card in the mail, you flip it over, there's small print, and you sort of LIBOR. What the hell is LIBOR? That's some rate somewhere in London. So why? Why does it have to be so difficult to understand what's going on with your credit card, with your mortgage?
That's profitable, right?
Exactly.
The less you know as a consumer, the more money they can make off of you.
Right. That's why. 100% margin product in the world of banking is late fees and various forms of hidden charges. So I thought to myself, with things like Yelp and all the other great projects that I've been involved in, as you unbundle the complexity, you wind up with better, stickier, more profitable business model in the end. And no one's really done it for financing. So we set off with Affirm to build the future of financial services for consumers. Having said that, you can have a lofty vision. You got to start somewhere very specifically. Right. What we started with is point of sale lending. So when you go to a big department store, the salesperson will inevitably say, hey, come back and apply for the in-store credit card. And you know that it's going to be a painful process. You're not going to probably get approved. It's going to be based on your FICO score, which is some magical score that no one fully understands. And you're going to get screwed. The fees are going to be bad. The interest rate is going to be horrible. It's just going to be atrocious. So well, and yet retailers do it all the time because it's a great boon to the retailers. It increases their sales. It improves their conversion. So merchants are motivated to do this, and they know that consumers hate this stuff, and they're still selling it. So I said, well, what if we provided a really amazing alternative? What it would be transparent, clean, simple.
But Affirm is short-term consumer credit to make purchases at a point of sale.
That is exactly right. That's what it is today. It ultimately expands into all kinds of interesting services.
So it's kind of, you're changing one high-interest consumer loan for a different, slightly lower interest, but still relatively high-interest consumer loan.
It's fairly low, actually, and more importantly, compared to your credit card, which is a good baseline alternative. If you're carrying a balance like 6 out of 10 Americans, we will save you several $100s on a $2,000 purchase. So these are very, very affordable loans.
What's the average rate that you charge a customer? So if I have let's say I have decent credit, not great, not terrible, kind of middle range, what would you charge me on an Affirm loan?
Somewhere between 16 and 17%, I imagine.
And the average credit card is what?
Depends on where you are, but if you are like most of our customers, which is a millennial, somebody fresh out of college with a thin file, in other words, a FICO score that hasn't been fully calculated, probably $29.99 is what you're looking at. So
it's about half off, essentially.
It really depends. So one of the things that we do, because we are, in fact, a 21st century company as opposed to something founded in the 50s, we price every loan to the transaction, to the person, to the merchant. These loans are not compounding interest. It's a straight line, so you know exactly what you're borrowing and what the payment will be each month. So the transparency part is probably
do consumers really want you to vet their credit every time they want to buy something? I mean, that sounds like a pretty unfun process to me.
It takes less than a half a second, so they can't really, they're not encumbered.
How can you do that, though? How can you look at me, my entire profile in life, in less than half a second and decide what rate you should charge me? That feels kind of like a quick glance.
Well, so long as the rate I can charge you is really good for you, it's probably not a kind of quick glance that you don't like, but we're pretty good at it. We connect to a whole bunch of databases. We've built out a bunch of really good models that forecast your ability to repay and your propensity and interest, in fact, to repay us. So it's a lot of the same sort of math that we did at PayPal, trying to figure out who's a good guy, who's a bad guy.
So what are the signals you look for? I mean, your algorithm, it sounds interesting, but I don't think people understand how it works, and so I don't think they'd be confident saying they're going to get a fair shake from you, because they don't know what you're looking at, and they may not feel that the signals you do have are fair about them. So if you're going to vet them quickly and give them this interest rate, how do they know it's reasonable? Or you're just wrong?
Well, first of all, they are not required to take it, so they can always fall back to their credit card or whatever other form of payment they have available to them. They can make a comparison right there and then, because we will disclose the interest rate and the charges that they'll see very, very transparently. The way we figure out who they are and how they are is on a bunch of several interesting ways. The most important thing that's probably true of today's millennial generation, their social security number has been replaced with their mobile number. Your mobile number is kind of a key, an index into a whole bunch of really interesting public databases. So anything from your social media to your phone bill is a really good way of figuring out who you are, what sort of income you have, what sort of debt you're likely to take on and be able to service. And debt to income ratio is one of the best financial metrics that we can use to figure out how likely you are to be able to take care of this loan.
So how quickly is Affirm growing? How much have you loaned out right now, say?
Well, it's actually kind of growing off the charts right now, so I'm a little
Give us a
terrified to
range.
give you a number. So we've been testing it it's been around for 2.5 years. We've been testing various forms of products, various versions of the loan. We've really settled on this really simple installment loan with explicitly disclosed charges up front. At this point, the merchants are seeing something like 30 to 40% increase in the cart size every time we offer this to them, so they're promoting us aggressively, and as a result,
you have how much loaned out right now to consumers?
That I can't tell you, but it's now in the millions.
Is it less than 10 million?
It is less than 10 million.
Is it more than 5?
I will plead the fifth on this one.
So between 1 and 10.
It's between 1 and 10.
That's really big.
It is.
How much has that grown in the last 6 months?
It's 4 digits worth of percent.
Okay. Then looking ahead 12 months, do you hit 100 million?
Yeah,
So 100 million in 12 months.
give or take. I think that's achievable.
Okay, we're going to hold you to that next year.
Okay.
Ask the same question. All right. So how often do people not pay you back?
Well, they have to not pay us back roughly less than the combined interest rate that we charge, because otherwise we would be unprofitable. Having said that, we look at non-repayment rates per tranche of credit. So people with super prime credit, in other words, people who could have basically people who choose us because of our transparency and quality of service versus our prices, pay us back 100% of the time. I don't think we've ever lost a penny. People that are already living in sort of a self-imposed recession definitely go delinquent and sometimes default, probably in the single digit to double digit percentages, and that's as it should be, because that's what credit is all about.
All right, last question. What's the next Affirm product?
That I will never broadcast. We like to surprise as opposed to a pre-sell.
All right, thank you, Max.